hour, amid heightened tensions with China along the LAC, India is set to host the third edition of the 2+2 ministerial dialogue with the United States from today. The US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Defense Secretary Mark Esper will be holding bilateral talks with Indian counterparts later today. The meeting will take place in New Delhi from 26th to 27th October, that is today and tomorrow. Now, Indian Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and Foreign Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar will meet US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Defence Secretary Mark Esper. During his visit, the Defence Secretary of US Mark Esper, will also be visiting the Tri-Services Guard of Honor. During this two-day meet, the main focus will be on China and how to contain its growing aggression in the region. Mike Pompeo had earlier said that during the upcoming visit, India and the United States will discuss how free nations can work together against the threats posed by the Chinese Communist Party. Senior officials of the US State Department, while conferring with analysts about discussions around China, said, and I'm quoting here, "Certainly the situation on the line of actual control will be discussed at some point, and we're watching the situation very closely. I think both sides have expressed desire to de-escalate violence." India and China, as you know, are in the middle of an ongoing military standoff. That started in April this year. The situation then worsened in June after 20 Indian soldiers died during clashes with PLA troops in the Galwan Valley. Even though Chinese army also suffered casualties, China never came out with an official figure. Focus will be on the exchange and cooperation agreement. US officials say that these agreements are a work in progress and that they cannot commit to anything right now. If signed, then the agreement will be the final military pact signed to increase interoperability and exchange of information. 3 such pacts have already been signed between India and the United States over the last 2 decades. The two nations intend to focus on 4 major themes in this upcoming ministerial dialogue. Global cooperation will be the major talking point, in which India and the United States will discuss public health collaboration as well as developments in the Indo-Pacific region. The issue of economic cooperation is also on the cards. It includes leadership in energy and in space. Along with these 2 key issues, people's ties and defense relations will also be discussed. Mike Pompeo will also be visiting Sri Lanka, Maldives and Indonesia over the next 1 week in what is being seen as an exercise to build regional consensus over Chinese threat in the Indo-Pacific. Pompeo's visit comes at a time when the Quad, comprising of Australia, India, Japan and the United States, is gaining currency. Earlier this week, Indian Defence Ministry announced that all 4 Quad members will take part in the upcoming Malabar exercises. They are scheduled to take place at the end of November. Talking about the exercise, a senior US State Department official said that the invitation to Australia shows strategic convenience. The last time Australia participated in Malabar was in 2007, more than a decade ago. In response to WION's question at the press briefing, the senior official said that the Quad is an informal arrangement. It is an alignment of democracies in the Indo-Pacific. There are many different dimensions in which it can grow and expand and more. All activities are on the table and meetings among officials in different places and at different levels and with different subject matters. This will be the first exercise after India signed logistical agreements with all Quad partners. The exercises are aimed at increasing interoperability between the countries as well as common use of military platforms. All in all, the 2+2 will be a reaffirmation of closeness between India and the United States, one of the most consequential relations of this century. Brahma Chalani, Professor of Strategic Studies at Center for Policy Research, is joining us live for more on this. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, we know that China's growing aggression will be a major point of discussion. What else can we expect from this meet?
Well, the central issue for the US is to co-opt India into a soft alliance devoid of any treaty obligations. And China's Himalayan aggression has come as a huge boon to the US to try and co-opt India into such a soft alliance. The fact that Pompeo and Esper traveled all the way to New Delhi just a week before the election day in the United States underscores the opportunity they feel that they ought to seize at this juncture, because the Chinese aggression really has pushed India to the brink, It's a tipping point for India. It's a tipping point also for the India-China relationship. And the Americans realize that they can actually use China's aggression to build the kind of partnership with India that they have long sought. India had been reluctant to give up its strategic autonomy, and this soft alliance goal of Washington was a goal that Washington had not been able to realize in the recent past, but they believe now that the Indian policy has begun to change. The fact that India invited Australia to the Malabar exercises next month is also a signal that India is taking a tougher stance toward China.
Yes.
And this opens up opportunity for US policymakers.
Also, what do you think can be expected with regards to the military pact, if it is signed, of course?
I think it's quite likely that this last of the four foundational agreements, as the US calls these agreements, will be signed during the Pompeo Esper visit to New Delhi. Now, under these accords, three have already been signed, and the fourth will focus on sharing geospatial data from airborne and satellite sensors. The earlier accords committed both sides to providing reciprocal access to each other's military facilities and securing military communications. So these four agreements the US has with all its close defense partners. So once the fourth agreement is signed, then India will clearly be one of America's close defense partners.
Do you think that this could have an impact on the situation at the LSE, given that this meet comes amid the standoff between India and China?
There are ongoing negotiations between China and India to diffuse the situation and reach a disengagement deal. It does not advance Chinese interests to have a standoff with India. And I will not be surprised if such an agreement is reached. I don't think the visits of Pompeo and Esper to New Delhi will make a difference to the ongoing negotiations.
All right.
The Chinese, if you recall, reacted very mildly to the Indian invitation to Australia to participate in the Malabar exercise. So I don't think the 2+2 discussions in New Delhi will affect the ongoing negotiations between China and India to disengage and to de-escalate tensions.
All right. Okay, and also just for some clarity on this, what outcomes can we expect when it comes to global cooperation and developments in the Indo-Pacific region?
The US regional strategy for the Indo-Pacific is centered on creating a free and open Indo-Pacific. In simple words, this means creating a constellation of democracies. American policymakers, including Pompeo, have said in public that India is the centerpiece of America's Indo-Pacific strategy. That concept of free and open Indo-Pacific was actually first articulated in 2016 by the then Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, but has become the linchpin of America's Indo-Pacific strategy. This is the first time that American policy has picked up a concept authored by a foreign leader and adopted it and made it the linchpin of its own regional strategy. And I think that in the global context, the emphasis is really on creating this constellation of democracies. And in fact, if you remember that in recent weeks, even European powers have decided to adopt Indo-Pacific strategies. They view a rules-based Indo-Pacific as central to international peace and security. France, for example, has a Indo-Pacific strategy. So does Germany. And Germany is the European Council president at the moment. It's also seeking to persuade the EU to adopt an Indo-Pacific strategy. This suggests that in the coming years, the Quad is likely to build close cooperation with European powers like Britain, France, and Germany.
All right. All right, Professor Chelani, thank you so much for joining us with all those details.